You're not tired because you work too much. You're tired because everything depends on you, all the time. Your job isn't the problem, the hours aren't the problem, even the money, most days, isn't the real problem. The exhaustion comes from holding everything together without letting anything fall. You wake up knowing what needs to be done. Bills get paid, deadlines are met, people rely on you, at work, at home, in decisions no one else wants to make. From the outside, your life looks stable, functional, responsible. Nothing is on fire, nothing is collapsing. There's no crisis dramatic enough to justify how heavy everything feels. And that's exactly the issue. Because when nothing is allowed to break, nothing is allowed to rest. You don't feel panic, you feel pressure, a constant low-level tension that never turns off. You relax, but not completely. You rest, but stay alert. You take breaks, but your mind keeps running in the background, tracking what could go wrong if you stop paying attention. This isn't burnout from doing too much, it's fatigue from being the one who prevents everything from falling apart. You're not pushing forward anymore, you're maintaining. Holding routines, holding responsibilities, holding commitments made years ago for a version of life that keeps getting heavier. And the most dangerous part? Because you're managing, because nothing has collapsed, you don't feel allowed to question it. You tell yourself this is just adulthood, that this is what stability feels like, that everyone is tired. But deep down, something feels off. If this exhaustion feels familiar, not explosive, not dramatic, just constant, stay with me. Because what's draining you isn't effort, it's the invisible weight of being the structure that keeps everything standing. And once you see that clearly, the story changes. Let me show you what this looks like, because from inside, it's hard to recognize. You wake up at 6:40, not because you chose to, but because 6:40 is the latest you can wake up and still hold the day together. Before your feet hit the floor, you're already running logistics. What needs to happen first, what can wait, what will fall apart if you forget. Breakfast isn't a break, it's a transition. You eat while reviewing something, responding to something, planning something. The day hasn't started, but your mind already has. By 10 a.m., you've made 40 small decisions, none of them dramatic, all of them necessary. What to answer, what to delay, what to absorb quietly so it doesn't escalate. By 3 p.m., you notice your shoulders are tight, your jaw is clenched, and you can't remember the last time you had a thought that wasn't logistical. By 8 p.m., you're sitting on the couch, technically resting, but still tracking what tomorrow requires. And then it repeats. Not because anything went wrong, because nothing can afford to go wrong. That's the detail most people miss. This tiredness doesn't come from bad days. It comes from the invisible cost of keeping every day good enough. No single task is unbearable, no single moment is a crisis, but the sequence never stops, and you are always the one carrying it forward. This isn't a personality flaw, it's what happens when your entire life is organized around one assumption, that if you stop paying attention, things collapse. And the scariest part? That assumption might be right, which is exactly why the structure needs to change. Here's the part most people struggle to admit. The system is working, but you aren't. Not because you're weak, not because you can't handle it, but because systems that rely on constant attention eventually drain the person maintaining them. Your life runs smoothly because you are always compensating. If something costs more, you adjust. If time gets tighter, you compress. If pressure increases, you absorb it. And slowly, without noticing, you become the shock absorber for everything. Nothing breaks because you bend first. Think about what that actually means. Every unexpected bill, every schedule change, every emotional need someone brings to you, you stretch to contain it. And each stretch feels small, but stretches accumulate. A rubber band pulled once snaps back. A rubber band held stretched for years loses its shape entirely. That's what's happening to you, not in a single moment, but across hundreds of invisible ones. This is why the tiredness feels so personal. You assume it's a flaw, a lack of motivation, burnout you should be able to fix with rest or discipline. But discipline is exactly what's keeping you stuck. You're disciplined enough to hold the structure together, but not free enough to step outside it. And the longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to imagine another way of living. Not because change is impossible, but because you've built a life where change feels dangerous. If you stop managing, things wobble. If you pause, things pile up. If you step back, you fear something important will drop. So you stay in motion, not moving forward, just preventing collapse. That's not failure, but it's not freedom either. Eventually, there's a cost to being the one who holds everything together. Not at once, not dramatically, but slowly, in ways that are easy to dismiss. You stop thinking long-term because the short-term needs constant attention. You postpone plans not because you gave up, but because now isn't the right time. You choose safety over growth because disruption feels too expensive. Your life becomes optimized for stability, not for possibility. And stability sounds good until you realize how fragile it is. Because this kind of stability only works as long as you keep performing, as long as nothing unexpected happens, as long as you don't get tired, as long as you don't step away. The structure doesn't support you, you support the structure. That's why even good weeks feel heavy, why success doesn't bring relief, why everything being fine still feels exhausting. Here's a test that makes this painfully clear. Imagine stepping away from your life for 2 weeks, no contact, no management, no oversight. What happens? If the honest answer is things fall apart, that's not stability. That's a system with a single point of failure, and that single point is you. You weren't meant to be the load-bearing wall of your own life, and the moment you see that, really see it, something shifts, not emotionally, structurally. The question stops being, "Why am I so tired?" and it becomes something much more uncomfortable. What have I built that requires me to never rest? And once that question appears, it doesn't go away. The damage doesn't show up as one big loss. It shows up as a pattern of small surrenders you stopped counting. The trip you planned 3 years ago that keeps getting pushed to next year. The project you wanted to start but never had the margin for. The conversation you've been meaning to have about what you actually want that keeps getting buried under what you need to do. None of these disappear loudly. They just drift further from reach, one practical decision at a time. And eventually, you stop bringing them up, even to yourself. Not because you don't want them, because wanting things you can't prioritize feels like adding weight to a structure that's already full. So you edit your desires down to fit the space you have left. You don't dream smaller on purpose, you just stop giving dreams bandwidth. And one day you realize that the life you're living isn't the life you chose. It's the life that survived your constant triage. That's the hidden cost most people never calculate. Not the things that went wrong, but the things that never got a chance to happen. Your days aren't chaotic. They're packed with small decisions that never stop coming. What to prioritize, what to delay, what to absorb quietly so nothing escalates. And because it works, you keep doing it. The problem isn't any single responsibility, it's the accumulation. Each task alone is manageable. Together, they create a life where your attention is always fragmented. You're never fully present, not at work, not at rest, not even in moments that should feel light. There's always something pending in the background. And over time, that background noise becomes the only sound you hear.
This is where most people get stuck. They assume the solution is rest. Take a break, sleep more, disconnect for a weekend. And those things help, briefly. But the tiredness always comes back because the problem was never lack of rest. It was the structure waiting for you when you return. Think about the last vacation you took. Remember the first 2 days? How long it took just to stop checking things? Then day 3, 4, you finally start relaxing. By day 5, something begins to unclench. And then, before you've actually recovered, you start mentally preparing for the return. The emails, the backlog, the fact that nobody handled what you normally handle. You didn't come back to space, you came back to accumulation. So rest becomes maintenance instead of recovery. You recharge just enough to keep going, not enough to change anything. That's why vacations feel shorter than they should, why Sundays feel heavy, why the idea of starting the week again already feels exhausting before you open your eyes on Monday. Your energy isn't being restored, it's being rationed. And when energy is rationed long enough, something shifts, quietly, without announcement. You stop dreaming in detail. You stop imagining alternatives. You stop asking what else could exist. Not because you don't want more, but because wanting more feels like work you can't afford. This is the quiet moment where people don't give up, they just stop reaching. Not a collapse, a slow fade. And that slow fade is more dangerous than any crisis because no one notices it happening, not even you. At some point, responsibility starts to feel like identity. You don't just do what needs to be done, you become the person who does it, the one who remembers, the one who fixes, the one who adapts so others don't have to. And slowly, without noticing, you stop seeing this as a role you play and start seeing it as who you are. That's dangerous because roles can change, identities feel permanent. Pay attention to how you introduce yourself, not your job title, but how you explain your place in people's lives. I'm the one who handles. I'm the one who makes sure. If I don't do it, nobody will. That language isn't description, it's a cage you've built from competence. You tell yourself this is just adulthood, that everyone feels this way, that stability requires sacrifice. But stability that depends entirely on your constant attention isn't stability, it's dependence, and the system is dependent on you. And the moment you step back, the truth becomes uncomfortable. If everything only works when you're holding it together, then nothing is actually supporting you. This isn't about quitting your job or blowing up your life or walking away from responsibility. It's about realizing that carrying everything alone isn't strength, it's exposure. You're not protected, you're the most vulnerable piece in the entire system, because without you, it fails. And once you see that clearly, a different question starts to surface. Not, how do I keep doing this, but what would my life need to look like for me to stop being the glue? That question changes what you notice next. There's a moment, usually quiet, when something finally clicks. Not because life explodes, not because you hit a wall, but because you notice a simple truth you've been avoiding. You're not tired because you're weak. You're tired because the system you're living inside requires constant effort just to stay upright. Nothing is wrong with you. What's wrong is how much of your life depends on your uninterrupted attention. Once you see that, something shifts internally. You stop asking why you can't keep up. You stop questioning your discipline, your motivation, your resilience. And instead, you notice patterns. How many things break if you slow down? How many plans depend on you absorbing pressure silently? How little margin exists if something unexpected happens? This isn't a character flaw, it's a design problem. And design problems don't get solved by trying harder. They get solved by rethinking how the pieces fit together. Think of it this way. If a bridge collapses under normal traffic, you don't blame the cars, you redesign the bridge. Your life is that bridge, and you've been blaming the traffic for years. That realization doesn't give you answers right away, but it gives you something more important: permission. Permission to stop blaming yourself. Permission to stop glorifying exhaustion. Permission to question a life that only works when you're constantly holding it together. And once you allow yourself to see that clearly, you can't unsee it. The exhaustion doesn't disappear overnight, but the shame does. And without the shame, you finally have enough clarity to look at the structure honestly and decide what actually needs to change. Here's what changes when your life no longer depends on nonstop effort. Not everything becomes easy, but everything becomes lighter. And lighter doesn't mean less. It means the weight is distributed. Picture a morning where you wake up and the first thought isn't logistical, where you drink coffee and actually taste it, not because you learned mindfulness, but because there's genuinely nothing urgent pulling your attention. That's not fantasy. That's what happens when the system can hold itself for a while. You stop scanning for the next problem before it appears. You stop bracing for impact every time the month turns. You stop living one interruption away from stress. Decisions slow down. in a good way. You think before reacting. You choose instead of defaulting. Rest starts to work again, not because you sleep more, but because nothing collapses when you do. You begin to feel something unfamiliar. Room. Room to think past tomorrow. Room to imagine changes without panic. Room to say no without fear of consequences cascading. The trip you postponed, you start looking at dates. The project you shelved, you pull it back out. The conversation you avoided, you finally have the bandwidth for it. From the outside, your life may not look dramatically different. No big upgrades, no flashy moves. But internally, everything operates under a different rule set. You're no longer the only thing keeping the system alive. And that's when energy comes back, not as adrenaline, but as clarity. You don't feel rushed, you don't feel trapped, you feel capable again. Not because you're doing more, but because you're finally doing less of what was never meant to be carried alone. Here's the truth most people never get told. You don't need more discipline, you don't need more motivation, and you definitely don't need to become tougher. You've already proven you can handle pressure. The real question is why your life requires so much of it in the first place. A life that only works when you're constantly alert isn't sustainable. It's just familiar, and familiarity can be dangerous because it feels normal even when it's draining you. The mistake wasn't commitment. The mistake was assuming commitment should feel like permanent tension. Once you stop asking, how do I keep pushing, and start asking, what structure would allow me to breathe, everything changes. Not overnight, not dramatically, but permanently. And structure doesn't mean a productivity hack or a morning routine. It means building a life where your absence doesn't cause collapse, where the system has enough support that you can step away without everything falling down. That might mean renegotiating responsibilities. It might mean letting some things be imperfect. It might mean accepting that control isn't the same as safety. Whatever it means for you, it starts with one decision: to stop being the single point of failure in your own life. This channel exists for people who are done blaming themselves for systems that were never designed to support them. No hustle fantasies, no shallow motivation, no guilt disguised as advice. We talk about structure, margin, and the invisible rules that decide whether life feels stable or constantly heavy. If this video helped you see something you couldn't name before, subscribe. Not for more content, but because the next video goes deeper into how actually to rebuild. And rebuilding starts the moment you decide that surviving isn't the same as living.